People tend to think that anxious attachers are the only ones who get overwhelmed. We all know. They spiral, they panic, they overthink, they'll blow up your phone. Avoidance, on the other hand, well, we get labeled as chill, unbothered, numb, and like we don't care. But that's the biggest misunderstanding in attachment, because avoidants also get overwhelmed. They're just better at looking like they're not. I want you to think about the last time you had a conflict with someone who is avoidant. Not the words, but the moment. The moment where you can literally feel them disappear. You know the look. Their eyes change, face goes flat, they get quiet, and you can't help thinking, wow, you must really not care. But what if that's not coldness? What if it's panic, just with a straight face? This is why the research on infants is so important, because this is where that myth started. Mary Ainsworth did this strange situation experiment where the caregiver leaves and then returns, and we watch what the baby does. Of course, the anxious babies protest. They cry, they reach, they cling. But the avoidant babies, well, they look just fine. And for years, people assumed maybe they just don't care. Maybe they don't even need closeness in the same way. But later, researchers did something even smarter. They stopped watching the baby's face, they stopped watching their behavior. They started measuring the baby's body: heart rate, stress response, cortisol. One of the most cited studies here is Spangler and Grossman in the early 90s. What they found was basically this: some of the babies who looked calm were definitely not calm. Their bodies were undergoing the same amount of stress as their anxious counterparts. They just had learned not to show it. So the avoidance strategy isn't, I don't care. It's, I'm not going to let you see me care. Now take that exact same thing and put it in an adult relationship. Let's pretend it's 9:30 at night. You're in the kitchen, and this conflict starts as something really silly, like the dishes or someone's tone, and people are cranky and it's late. You get a look or you get a comment. The anxious partner says, "Hey, why do you always shut down every time we're trying to talk about this?" And we know how that sounds. They're not necessarily being polite. They're activated. Their heart is pounding. Their brain is racing. They're connecting dots that probably shouldn't connect. In their head, they're saying, if we can't talk about this, then we're doomed. If you shut down every time, it feels like you don't care. And if you don't care, I'm definitely not safe. So they push. They need to talk. They need to explain. And they get a little more critical. Now, when we look at the avoidant partner, what's going on? Because this is where people misread them. They get quiet. They stare. They stop responding. They look blank. And the anxious partner can't help but think, oh, this doesn't matter to you at all? You seem totally fine. No, they are flooded too, but their thoughts are different than their anxious partners. Internally, what they're saying, I'm failing, I'm trapped, I'll never get this right. Whatever I'm going to say is going to only make it worse. Their nervous system does the only thing it learned how to do in moments like this: try to disappear. And yes, we see this in adult research too. There are studies where couples are brought into labs and asked to discuss unresolved conflict. The people with avoidant attachment, they don't always look distressed on the outside. But when measured, they definitely show stress internally. Cortisol changes and stress in the same way their anxious partners feel it. So again, it's not that anxious partners feel and avoidants don't. It's that anxious people show it, and avoidants have learned to hide it. Now I can already hear the comments. Okay, great. That's cool. They're overwhelmed. So are we. So what? What about the selfishness? What about the hyper independence? What about the way they act like they don't need anybody? Not to mention, what about all the bouncing around from relationship to relationship, leaving a trail of wreckage? And this is where I'm going to be honest with you. There isn't a perfect study that explains every avoidant behavior. But after seeing hundreds of avoidants, I can tell you there is a pattern that I see over and over again. And once you see it, it becomes hard to unsee. A lot of avoidants were rewarded for that independence as children. They were praised for not needing. You can do it alone. Look how mature you are. Why do you need my help? You've been doing it alone for so long. And yes, they could do it alone. But like most kids, and I hear this over and over again from avoidant clients, they did not want to do it alone. They longed for connection. I remember one client in particular told me, when I asked my parents to walk me to the bus stop for school, they said, why? You've been doing it alone for so long. You don't need us. And he paused and he said to me, like he was just reporting another thing, he said, I wasn't asking because I couldn't get to the bus stop. I was asking because I wanted to do it with them. He just wanted them to be there. He just wanted closeness, and they missed it. And that is the avoidant origin story in one sentence. I needed you, and you didn't see it. The avoidant child learned something early. Needing people hurts. Needing people is unsafe. Needing people doesn't work. So they stop asking. Not because they don't need, because it doesn't feel worth the risk anymore. Now that child becomes an adult that similarly has trouble asking for help and needing anybody. When I'm working with an avoidant, I always ask the same question. I call it the moving day question. It goes like this. Let's say you're in your early 20s and you're moving across town. You have a studio apartment, so it's not like a mansion's worth of stuff to move. But some things are clearly too heavy for you to do on your own. At what point in this process would you call someone and ask for their help? Secure clients always answer in the same way. They're like, oh yeah, people will just drop by throughout the process. One friend will help me with the couch. My cousin will drop in later. Someone brings me coffee. Anxious clients, on the other hand, they're calling people even before they choose the apartment. They would prefer someone was with them throughout the process. Pack with me, drive with me, be with me. And then there's the avoidant clients. Every single time. They laugh, they lean back in their chair, and they say with a totally straight face, I wouldn't. Or maybe they'll say, well, I just pay someone. So I always have to add, okay, sure, but you're like 22 years old. You don't have that kind of money yet. And that's where this gets good, because you can literally see their nervous system react. They get uncomfortable, they start to squirm, and then they give me their real answer. I'd call someone, but only as a last resort. Only after trying to do it all alone. Only after moving as much as possible by myself. So when you're dating an avoidant and you're watching them shut down, you're watching them go blank. You're watching them act like they don't need you or anything from anybody. You're not watching someone who doesn't feel. You're watching someone who learned needing someone is dangerous, showing it is dangerous, and depending on others will only lead to hurt. So they become experts at just being fine, even when they're not.